happier, healthier employees perform better. But also we have a responsibility when we are leaders to take care of the people that we lead, right? And the people that we serve. We need to be able to connect with the people we serve and the people we lead. And the hybrid model is, of course, a challenge or a little bump on that in terms of creating connection, in terms of creating trust. I mean, you and I, we spent 90,000 hours at work in a lifetime, right? And who is responsible for our well-being? Mostly, of course, ourselves, but mostly our managers, right?
Hello everyone, welcome to Recruiting Revolution. For today's episode, we have Lars. Lars is a distinguished Harvard graduate and esteemed HR professional, offers valuable guidance to companies as a consultant with over 20 years of experience in international organization and HR management. Lars advises on topics like talent attraction strategy and cultivating a culture of compassion. He has authored 2 remarkable books, including the #1 international bestseller, Organizational Happiness, showcasing his profound knowledge and impactful ideas in the field of human resources. Welcome, Lars. We are delighted to have you on the podcast, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Nidhi, and thank you for those kind words on that nice introductory to me. Thank you.
Great. Before we dive in, can you please enlighten us with your remarkable journey, like spanning over 2 decades?
Yeah, so that's, we have limited times. That's a very long story when it's 2 decades, I just say. But basically, from a professional point of view, I graduated as a lawyer in the early 90s and was a part of that IT wave in the early 90s, doing a lot of mergers and acquisitions as a corporate counsel, you could say, or in-house lawyer. But very fast, I would say, I wanted to say, and I think we will talk more about this at some point, but I have a passion for unlocking potential. That's what I do, and that's what I spent most of my professional life on. And also there in the early days of my professional career, I found out as a lawyer, when you do mergers and acquisition, gradually I think I was good at that. I had some success in that, merging and integrating companies. But very often when it comes to integrating organizations or maybe making people work together in the best possible way, it's not about law or legal stuff or contracts. It's about how can we create a culture, an environment where people want to stay, want to work together, and can use their strengths to perform. So maybe after 5 years or so, I moved into HR, and the last 20, maybe even 25 years, I've been in different roles in HR. I mean, as an executive, in leadership roles, sometimes working from corporate perspective or with a corporate structure, being a vice president or executive vice president, and very often nowadays I'm a trusted advisor to executives and corporate organizations, even NGOs and other global institutions.
Amazing. I'm eager to understand how your interest grew in human resources, from law to human resources. Would love to learn a little bit on that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very often people when I say that I graduated as a lawyer, sometimes the people I work with now are surprised by that because they see corporate lawyers in a specific box or in a specific picture on that. But I think for me it was, how can I use the things that I do really well and the things that I see, which is very much about unlocking potential, or see how can we do more here with what we have. And so that was a passion for me, and that is a passion for me. And I think moving into HR, and of course the move from law or legal into HR, organization development, leadership development, was that demanded, of course, an upgrade, I would say, like you said, at Howard, INSEAD, and other things, and kind of the knowledge that you have. But it also demanded a very good team around me that could support me in that. So in the beginning, I would say it was more leadership role for me, and gradually for me it was more like, how can I offer advice, give perspective, deliver solutions to organizations and leaders.
Got it. That's amazing. Moving forward, we'd love to know more about, the book that you've written, Organizational Happiness, which explores the concept of finding the organizational happiness sweet spot, which is something quoted, and how HR practitioners can leverage from it. Would love to read it one day.
Yeah, for sure. I'll make sure that let's find out a way that you can have it in a PDF, or you could share it with your network, and I will be in your area, I think, later this year. So let's see how we can connect on that. So the happiness sweet spot is first the book. It was something around the happiness sweet spot that I've been worked with my clients, with leaders and organizations in my network. And it felt that there was something in there that we need to put out there, because for many more leaders and organizations to know about, so they could actually work in a structured, effective way with happiness and well-being in organizations. So I developed the happiness sweet spot, which is basically based on the science of happiness, and it has 3 pillars. It's purpose, it's strengths-based leadership, and it's compassion. So each of these 3 areas, you, as an organization, you're able to dive into these 3 pillars and say, is there something here I can do more of to cultivate a culture where we focus on the well-being of our employees? And basically because, maybe we'll come back to that, but basically because we know that happier, healthier employees perform better, but also we have a responsibility when we are leaders to take care of the people that we lead, right? And the people that we serve. So the happiness sweet spot, to get back to your question. So the happiness sweet spot is, you should look at it as a lens, almost like a pair of glasses you put on, and look at your organization with those 3 lenses and say, how can I find that sweet spot between purpose, strengths-based leadership, and compassion, so I am able to cultivate a culture where, as I said, we have a happier, healthier employees.
Yeah, that is so true. Also, what are your thoughts on, to measure and monitor those organization happiness and employee engagement? How can we follow up on that? Like whether it has been, in the organization, or, it's just on the upper area and not the, as a whole for every employee. So how can we follow up on that perspective?
Yeah, I think, very good question, Lydia. I think from a higher perspective, I think we are in the same professionalism here. We, as a part of the HR society community, being HR professionals, I think we need to offer that. We need to have clear KPIs that we measure on. Otherwise, it very often gets a profession where we feel and where we think. And sometimes that makes it difficult for us to step into the boardroom, do that presentation on happiness, if we don't have the real business case behind it, and if we're not able to offer a platform or infrastructure where you're able to measure and follow up on it on a regular basis. So I think there are many pulse surveys out there, but I would say one perspective is many organizations do annual employee engagement surveys, or you can call it different things, employee satisfaction, or I think, if I have to be a little blunt, just for the purpose of this, I would say that is very often a waste of time. I think we are wasting our time and resources on doing annual or even measurements even every 6 months because we measure it. I mean, we send out the survey, then we have 100 questions or 50 questions. We as HR, we get the results, the data, and then we have to work with it, and then we share it with the organization. And just from, if I'm the employee, from when I'm answering that until the real data is ending up at my manager's meeting somewhere, it might take a few months. So we're actually acting a whole year on old data.
Yeah.
And we're kidding ourselves because we think we know how it is, but we don't know. We just have some old data that we are looking into. So that's why I think sometimes, very often, it's a waste of time. It's not always like that, but very often we can do it better. And I think a better way is to do pulse surveys. Pulse surveys in the meaning that we measure every month. We have 10 questions, 5 questions, 1 question. I advocate the motivational landscape because it fits so well with the happiness sweet spot because it measures on purpose, strengths-based leadership, and compassion in action. So there we use 10 questions. We ask and the 10 questions, it takes an employee 90 seconds to give feedback on that. And it's almost in real time because then you get your group score or data, and immediately you can have these monthly meetings or weekly meetings you have with your team and say, how are we doing? What should we do more of? Or what works well here? Or you can even look to another department and say, who is really good at this? Do we have a lighthouse in our organization that we need to look more? Maybe Needy, as you say, hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Maybe you're doing a really good job in strengths-based leadership. Maybe we should look to you as a role model, and how can we expand the best practice? And also, I think that's an equally important part is sometimes we have teams or departments where we need to see the smoke before it becomes a fire. Sometimes, and if you measure it on a regular basis, you can see, but there's something here that is not working. We need to look into that. Maybe it's more than just the manager having a conversation. Maybe we as HR need to step in and say what's going on here. I would say measure 10 questions I think is a nice number, specific question, and then measure how things are going over the year. I think that's becoming best practice right now to do it in that way.
Yeah, so that's the real data that we're talking about. So yeah, I think that is really, we can do that here in Recruity as well.
Yeah, you should. Yeah.
Because we are talking about real-time data, but in hybrid models, will this work same for the hybrid and remote models as well?
I think we have some challenges with the hybrid models. I think we all have that on a global perspective, a little bit depending on the industry you're in, of course, and what kind of work you're doing. But of course, you know all about that also. But so there are some challenges here. I mean, just taking this example, you and I don't know how many kilometers, 5,000 or 8,000 kilometers between you and I at the moment. So we make an effort to connect because we have an important topic to talk about. Of course, I think on a human level, it would be easier for us to connect if we were in the same room. And I think that speaks to leadership also. I think as leaders, we need to be able to connect with the people we serve and the people we lead. And the hybrid model is, of course, a challenge or a little bump on that in terms of creating connection, in terms of creating trust between human beings. But I think speaking to the pulse surveys, I think another headline that I would speak to is employee listening. And I think that is a nice word for also doing pulse surveys. But I think we need to, maybe the hybrid model is demanding more employee listening. Both we as managers being able to listen actively what's going on, but also the listening is also doing surveys or doing feedback models where you have an input from different angles on how are we doing, so we're able to do something about it. The hybrid model it's it's not the easiest thing. And one more thing I want to say on that, of course, I could share more, but I think recently we have done some work on tapping into the power of belonging, because the power of belonging, you can almost hear it, the headline there, the power of belonging, that it's me feeling that at work, I am seen. I'm seen as the human I am, with what I bring and with whatever family and everything. The special human, unique being I am. I'm able to contribute. So seen, I'm able to contribute. I use my superpowers for the purpose of my organization. And the last thing is that I feel proud of being part of recruiting in this, or whoever that is.
Yeah.
So tapping into that power of belonging, I think is handled also in terms of a hybrid model, which is just a very big challenge for many managers these days, I think.
But it's work in progress, I guess. I think it's work in progress. Like people working hybrid, like managers are still working on it.
I think so, and I think there is an ongoing conversation, and I follow this with some of my clients and leaders on these levels. And some leaders are suddenly now demanding everybody should go back to work. They should be in the workspace. We need to see everybody in the work. And I don't think that's the right solution. But I think we can talk about a sweet spot again, or there is the tipping point where you need somehow to be connected to the people at your work. And I think sometimes that demands a physical interaction or being in the same room, right? I think, I'm curious to see where this lands, and I think in some industries it's easier to have this conversation than in others, And I know some of the work that you're doing also. It's
Yeah. Also, can you share like any example of organizations that have successfully, transformed their employee experience or employee engagement by this monthly surveys, or like the 10 questions that you've suggested? So are there any organizations that have benefited from that in your terms?
Yeah, so some of one of them I wanted to mention here, because I know I'm allowed to mention. It's some work we have been doing with Boston Scientific, which is a large global organization present in 130 countries, 45,000 employees. So that's a good example because it works across geographies, and so they started some years ago, and I want to say this some years ago because I think very often this, well-being, happiness, which is a big thing right now, sometimes it's seen as an employee service. Sometimes it's the flavor of the month or even the year, and we say, okay, we need to have a well-being program, and I'm all for that, of course. But very often it ends up being mindfulness training or yoga or lunch packages or a ping pong table or something, service to the employees. And while I can agree with that, that's not a strategic priority. If you want to make it a strategic priority, then you start talking about how can we, as managers, we know we have an obligation I think we have an obligation as managers to create an environment where we focus on the well-being of the people that we serve and lead. I think it's an obligation because you and I, we spent 90,000 hours at work in a lifetime, right? And who is responsible for our well-being? Mostly, of course, ourselves, but mostly our managers. So I think it's an obligation for managers, if you take that role seriously, at the people you serve, because that's what you do when you lead. That's an obligation. And we know that it's a real opportunity also, right? It's almost like a no-brainer because we have all the business cases that happier, healthier employees are focusing as a strategic priority on well-being in your organization. There's just so much performance in that. Productivity, customer satisfaction, less burnout, and all those business cases, of course, we have, and we know that, so it's almost like a no-brainer to do it. And let me get back to Boston Scientific, because they have made it a strategic priority. And over the years, they have measured regularly on these 3 areas in organization: happiness, purpose, strength, and compassion. And different years or different periods, they have said, okay, we might need to focus the next year's strategy on our purpose, or designing an employer value proposition, or doing more on employer branding, whatever you call it. And recently, I know last year, they focused a lot on compassion in action as a leadership culture. So they have kind of, looked into the organization, measured it, and say, maybe we need to adjust a little bit here to find that sweet spot where we are happier as an employee, but we also know that means that we perform better for the purpose of what we're doing in our organization. I think that's a very good example, and they're doing a quite good job, I think.
That's amazing. And also, when can we expect like one more book from you? Like, is there any book you're writing now? Is it in any book anytime soon?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And it's not an easy process for me to write books. So, both because on a personal, and can share personally, it's a vulnerable thing to publish a book, because you put your book out there, and of course you wanted to, my thought at least, that's what's going on in my head. What everyone can see that maybe I'm not that smart, or maybe I'm so you put your heart out there, right? And luckily, I think the last book, as you referred to, Organization Happiness, became a #1 international bestseller very fast in many geographies. Mostly because I think what I had to do there is to take my academic ego out of the book.
Yeah.
Because very often the academic ego wants to explain, wants to be the expert, but there's not a lot happening around that. And I think what we need here is more a how-to. And that I think I offered in the organization. How do you actually work with this in a simple way? Because, sometimes we say that complexity is the enemy of execution. And I think that goes for this field also. We need to be quite simple, offering simple approaches. So the next book is, I'm writing on the next book, but I don't want to promise you when it's out, because it's, as I said, it's a difficult process for me. But I know what the name is Compassion in Action.
Okay.
Which is really about how to cultivate a culture of compassion in your organization. Because I think compassion is leadership. You cannot have real leadership without compassion. And for me, it's also a journey, because, I wrote the book some years ago, and one of the pillars were compassion.
Yeah.
But I think the more I look into that area, and also, we have had a period of a couple of years where it's been very difficult for leaders to lead, because of people not being, because of the COVID situation, whatever you call it. So when we started to look into compassion, I thought there's something here, there's more to this. And for leaders, I think the conversations, when I advise organizational leaders and they want to talk about compassion, the first thing leaders want to talk about is self-compassion. They want to talk about, how can I take care of myself so I can be, and that perspective, I think we need to talk a little more about. And I hope to be able to share my perspective and contribute to that conversation with the next book, Compassion in Action.
I'm sure it's gonna be #1 again.
Let's see.
Yeah. So Lars, that concludes our side. Thank you for addressing all these questions, and our listeners will surely gain valuable insights from this conversation. We greatly appreciate your participation, and it has been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Lars.
Great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. You too.